Today I'm going to talk about Ludkins and PSA. I am involved in this situation. I have submitted cards to PSA via Ludkins. For those who don't know, PSA is the largest grading authenticator for cards, so Pokemon cards or sports cards, and Ludkins is a UK-based middleman service that sends those cards on behalf of the customer. These middleman services exist because to submit cards cheaply to PSA you need to be a member, so they have membership access and they can send cards on behalf of customers. To break down what's happened in 2020 all the way through to July 2021, people submitted cards to Ludkins. They emailed them first, they told them the cards were coming. Ludkins then invoiced them once the cards arrived. So every customer is paid upfront based on what PSA were charging at the time per card. Those cards were then sent to PSA. What should happen then is the cards are graded, sent back to Ludkins, and they come back to the customer. In reality, what happened, the cards were sent and then there was radio silence from both companies for over a year and a half. This radio silence is only now being broken after rumours circulated that Ludkins could no longer pay PSA. But first off, I want to say that PSA and Ludkins are both equally to blame for this situation. PSA, to begin with, they take on these third-party submitters and they put them on their website as a verified partner, almost like a franchise you're sending your cards to. I am effectively a PSA customer because I have paid for their services via a recommended submitter. So they're on their website and they were fully endorsed. So number one, they have not vetted any of these companies properly. And I'll explain why. We can look at the statement and we can even see that even basic information they don't know about Ludkins. Number two, their whole business model and practice around these third-party submitters is completely flawed and it's open to failure, as we've seen 2 times now. They don't take money up front off these companies, which means they don't know how much money these companies have ring-fenced to pay them later. PSA also upcharge cards based on their value, so they charge more for higher end cards. And if this has happened to Ludkins, they can no longer pay their bill because if there's too many high end cards in their submission, it's gone beyond the amount of money they've taken off the customers. And this is completely Ludkins and PSA's fault. Ludkins should be ring fencing enough money for upcharges from PSA's invoice, and PSA should be taking money from Ludkins up front. They wait to the end of the submission line and then they ask for the money. And at that point, if a company can't pay it, what happens? Well, this happens. Basically, customers' cards are held in limbo. We'll read the statement from PSA first. There's a lot of contradictory information in these. Both blaming each other, saying both are uncooperative, or the other one's not cooperating with the other. Dear PSA UK collectors, effective immediately, PSA is discontinuing its relationship with Ludkins Collectibles. Ludkins is no longer an authorized PSA dealer or allowed to use the PSA UK name. Ludkins is failing to pay PSA for its services, while PSA believes that Ludkins has already collected payment from its customers. So this is an authorized seller on your website, and you don't know for sure if Ludkins has already taken payment from its customers. When you're in talks with a third party submitter, how is that not one of the questions you ask? When do you receive money from the customer? Why have you wrote in your statement, we believe? Why wouldn't you say we know that the customers have already paid for this? That just makes me think they have no fucking clue what any of these third-party submitters are doing. Because they've in the statement, they vaguely said, we believe you've already paid. Fucking too right, we've already paid. Right? You should know that. They were on your website. That's like the first paragraph in your statement. And you've already, you've not filled me with confidence that you know anything about Ludkins. Like, that should be the first question you ask. How are you going to be taking payment from the customers? Because you've got to pay us, down the line. All cards have been received by PSA. The last order was September 2022. Have been graded. And they're in PSA's possession. Furthermore, PSA offered to return the cards to Ludkins despite payments. so Ludkins could return the cards to their customers. Now that is extremely fishy. Like, obviously, there was a caveat to that, which they don't want to say. You know, there was a clause to returning the cards for free. There might have been a caveat there to say that Ludkins would have had to pay them, you know, in lump sums for the next couple of years or whatever, but we just don't know because these two companies just aren't transparent. It takes them 2 years to release a vague statement where they blame each other. No customer support. You try to get in touch with PSA, you try to get in touch with Ludkins, you don't get any response on the matter. So Ludkins could return the cards to their customers, which unfortunately was met with resistance and further demands. Well, why didn't you tell us what the resistance and the further demands were, instead of releasing this extremely vague statement? Our focus is now determined on a safe path to return these cards to rightful owners. Well, what they've done is if you look at the bottom of this sheet here, there is a Google form, and they're asking customers to send all of their card details and pictures of the cards, which is not going to work. They have hundreds of thousands of Ludkins customers' cards. Imagine the amount of duplicates that are going to be within those orders. If they don't have the customers' records or customers' order numbers, I fail to see how they're going to provide each customer with their exact card. Unfortunately, Ludkins has not shared any details with PSA on which cards belong to which customers. So PSA is currently unable to individually engage with Ludkins customers to return their cards directly. To return the cards to the correct customers in the safest way possible, PSA is going to move forward with a formal disposition process for all unpaid orders submitted from Ludkins UK. Once this is completed, this will allow PSA to take legal possession of our cards. All right, legal. So they're gonna basically own our cards, and the excuse they say for this is so they can have a third party then distribute them because they own them. All right, I'm not comfortable with PSA taking ownership of my cards. What I would be comfortable with is if PSA stopped bickering and stopped trying to strong arm Ludkins, and Ludkins to stop trying to strong arm PSA. I would like them both to come to an agreement, get the order numbers to PSA, and send them out to the customers immediately. None of this acquiring my cards legal bullshit. Why don't you fucking talk to each other and sort the situation out now? Hey, because this is an absolute shambles. You look like an amateur fucking company here. You know, basic foresight and business practices into these group submissions. Why don't you just stop them altogether if you can't handle them? And if someone's desperate to get their cards back, you know, in their eyes, if they see this statement, they're going to immediately assume that PSA tried their best to get these cards back, and they're the good guys in this whole situation, where in reality they're both incompetent that don't want to deal business with each other, and the ones that are suffering are the customers. All right. So there's basically at the end, looking ahead, we're going to make changes to increase the confidence in PSA. Well, that's too late. And our dealership program, blah blah blah. Don't give a shit about any of that. And there's a Google form. So if you are affected by this situation, fill in the form, see what happens. I think you're probably not going to get your original card back. In some cases, you might get someone else's card back. That's a duplicate, but at least you're getting that card back, essentially. So what you've got there is you've got PSA pointing the finger at Ludkins, saying they don't want to help in any way to get these cards back. They won't give us any order reference numbers, so we're going to have to legally take possession of the cards, which I'm not comfortable with at all, but there's nothing we can do about that. What I gathered from that is they put these third-party submitters on the website without knowing any details of them. They don't know anything about them. They don't know how they take payment. They don't know when they take payment. They don't know if their expertise is high enough to stop higher-end cards passing through. They don't ask for customer reference numbers when a bulk submission comes through in case anything goes wrong. It looks completely amateurish from PSA's part. And then we'll move on to the statement from Ludkins. The Ludkins statement, I won't bore you with, but I'll leave a link in the description to it. He basically blames Brexit, COVID. He says he sells all of his stuff off. Now, what I want to say about Ludkins is they probably knew PSA was going to upcharge cards. They must have known they would have needed more funds to cover this, and they're completely at fault for not realizing they needed more funds. They went AWOL. They didn't give any communication. I'm sure they did some illegal activity. They started deleting customers' order reference files. They had a Google Doc file that was stored on their Google documents, and they started deleting them all once the shit hit the fan. All right, that is completely fucking scummy. Those customers need those order reference details. Just because you don't want to talk to PSA and you don't want PSA to find all these order references and details, don't fucking delete them. That is absolutely abhorrent. All right, you claim you're collectors and you care about customers, and yet you two can't come to an amicable agreement where you send the order reference to PSA, or PSA sends them to you and you distribute them out. He's basically said at the end, which is the only interesting part, my final request to PSA was to assist with the return of outstanding customers' cards. And then he says PSA declined. Again, another vague statement. Like, who's telling the truth here? I mean, we don't care. We just want the cards back at this point. But that is a breakdown of the situation. The only thing I've got to say is, this was a scam. We paid up front for a service. The service was not met by either party. Both parties are completely to blame. Every UK customer has been scammed out of their money, and now PSA is going to take legal ownership of the cards, which is going to probably take another year. You know, this is a legal process, and then they're going to distribute them, and we don't know if this is going to be the original card that we sent off. So it's a massive scam. It's PSA's fault. It's Ludkins' fault. Get the cards out now. Start talking to each other and stop bickering like fucking children. Whilst I was editing the video, I saw an interesting post from a user that's also been affected by the Ludkins issue. He states, I'm going to read it and put it on the screen, but the text is small. So he states in his message here, the bulk of it, in your status, you've stated that you had to sell your possessions and collection in order to try and pay the invoice for PSA. The cards in question from October 2020 to March 2021, they're the ones that are missing. That's 5 months worth of submissions, and again, your company told me that you would hit the 30,000 card submission limit for each of those months. That's 1,500 cards at £8.90 per card, equaling 1.3 million in revenue. So even if Ludkins couldn't pay the full PSA bill, surely they could have offered a large chunk of that money to resolve the issue, or resolve some of the issue. Where the fuck, if that is true, is that money gone? Has he walked away with that money? Has PSA taken some of that money? You know, these are questions that we'll never have answered unless there's some sort of legal ramification for both of these companies, because that is a lot of money. And I know a lot of cards were submitted through Ludkins, but I didn't know the extent of the numbers, and I guess we never will. So that is, again, purely speculation, because there's no email to back up that statement. But you have to realise that a large amount of money passed through both of these, or passed through Ludkins, and we have no idea where it's gone.